Do you have any idea who you just humiliated? Hissed a dark-haired man in a perfect Armani suit, clutching the sales manager's lapel. Sir, I don't understand, the manager stuttered, feeling cold sweat running down his back. Summa, that woman you called another dreamer and sent her to look at used cars is my wife. And you know what else? Last night I was going to sign a contract to buy 12 cars for our corporation. 12, his eyes flashed with fury. But now I'm going to destroy you and this whole business. Please, there was a misunderstanding. The manager's face turned pale. Misunderstanding? The man smiled bitterly. Do you know what a real misunderstanding is? To think that a person's worth is measured by his clothes. The most exciting part is coming up. Stay tuned to find out how it all ends. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Emily Bennett, a 35-year-old woman with delicate features, pulled her modest sedan into the parking lot of Imperial Motors, the most prestigious car dealership in Beverly Hills. In the rearview mirror, she adjusted her dark hair, which was pulled back into a simple ponytail, and exhaled nervously. Today was a special day, the day she finally decided to fulfill her brother Matthew's long-time dream. Matthew, a talented artist diagnosed with autism, had a lifelong obsession with a particular brand of car. He drew them with maniacal precision, knew every technical characteristic, and could talk for hours about their design solutions. But he himself could never get behind the wheel of such a car. His condition did not allow him to get a driver's license. Emily glanced at her reflection. In plain jeans, a white t-shirt, and scuffed sneakers, there was nothing about her appearance that screamed wealth or status. She had always kept it simple, even after marrying Nathan Bennett, one of the West Coast's most influential tech entrepreneurs. Those who knew her knew that her modesty was not a matter of financial constraints, but a conscious choice. Stop doubting yourself, she told herself. It's just a car dealership. After all, the money is green no matter who pays it. Stepping out of the car, Emily walked resolutely towards the main entrance of the showroom. The huge glass doors slid silently open, inviting her into a world of luxury and exclusivity. Inside, high ceilings, marble floors, and perfect lighting created the atmosphere of a temple of automotive perfection. The models on display, each on its own podium, looked like works of art. Bentley, Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, Aston Martin, and Ferrari all sparkled under the directed beams of light, like precious stones in a museum exhibit. Emily felt a little nervous. Despite her status, she rarely visited places like this. The charity work she had been doing for the past decade had taken her to entirely different worlds: rehabilitation centers, special schools, hospitals. There, her simple clothes were a practical choice, not a social statement. In the center of the showroom, she saw it. Celestial Cobalt, limited edition, only 12 cars in the whole world. Deep blue color with barely noticeable metallic tint. Smooth lines of the body, handmade by masters with centuries-old history. It was this model that Matthew drew most often in recent months. It was this one that he could talk about for hours, looking at photos in specialized magazines. Emily walked slowly up to the car, looking at every detail with reverence. The feeling that she was doing something important and right filled her with confidence. On Matthew's 30th birthday, she would give him more than just a car. She would give him a dream, made of metal and leather. Of course, he wouldn't be able to drive it himself, but Emily had already arranged for a professional driver to drive her brother around town several times a week. Across the room, James Higgins, the sales manager, adjusted his immaculate Italian tie and looked around the room with an appraising eye. The last 2 weeks had been tough. He hadn't met his sales targets, and the pressure from management was growing. I need a big sale, and fast, he thought, drumming his fingers on the glossy surface of his desk. At that moment, he noticed a woman looking at Celestial Cobalt. Her simple clothes and modest appearance immediately irritated him. Another daydreamer flashed through his mind. People like her have no idea how much of my time they waste with their idle fantasies. A young consultant, David Chen, spotted a potential client and walked toward her with a genuine smile. But James quickly took over, shouldering David aside. Can I help you? He asked with a small forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. There was a distinct note of condescension in his voice. Are you perhaps lost? Emily turned around, slightly surprised by the tone of the question. No, thank you. I'm exactly where I wanted to go, she replied calmly. I'm interested in this model. Celestial Cobalt, right? James couldn't hide his wry smile. Yes, it really is Celestial Cobalt. Limited edition, only 12 copies in the world. The price starts at $420,000. He deliberately emphasized the price, expecting to see shock or embarrassment on her face. But Emily just nodded, as if this amount was entirely expected. I know. I'm interested in the technical specifications and the possibility of a test drive. My brother, he's a big fan of this model. The sales manager looked skeptically at her worn sneakers and plain t-shirt. Unfortunately, test drives are only available to pre-approved customers. This is a very exclusive model, James feigned regret. Perhaps you would be interested in checking out our used car department. We have some very decent options in a more affordable price range. Emily felt a slight twinge of hurt, but decided not to show it. I'm sure used cars are great, but I came specifically for the Celestial Cobalt. My brother has been dreaming about this model for many years. I understand your desire to please your brother, James smiled indulgently, but perhaps you should choose a gift that your family can really afford. We can offer branded accessories, models in a scale of 1 to 18. At that moment, a young consultant, whom James had pushed aside earlier, approached them. Sorry for interrupting, David nodded politely. I can tell you all about the technical features of Celestial Cobalt if you're interested. James shot him an annoyed look, but before he could respond, a middle-aged couple in designer clothes walked in. The manager instantly lost interest in Emily. Excuse me, I have real clients waiting, he said casually. David, show the lady the accessories catalog. Without waiting for an answer, James hurried to the new visitors, instantly transforming into the embodiment of helpfulness and attention. Mr. and Mrs. Baker, what a joy to see you again in our salon. David looked at Emily with confusion. I apologize for my colleague. He can be a bit blunt. Are you genuinely interested in Celestial Cobalt? Yes, Emily nodded. My brother Matthew, he has autism, and he's just obsessed with this model. I want to give him this car for his 30th birthday. Hire a driver to drive him around town. You know, for people with this diagnosis, such special interests are a whole world. David listened to her with genuine interest. That's very noble of you. I'd be happy to tell you all the details about this model. It's really special. For the next 15 minutes, the young consultant enthusiastically described the car's technical specifications, interior features, and unique design features. Emily listened attentively, asking pointed questions that revealed her intimate knowledge of the subject. What about a test drive? She asked when David finished his story. Technically, it does require pre-approval, he admitted. But I can arrange everything if you're seriously interested in buying. I'm more than serious, Emily replied confidently. In fact, I'm ready to make a deposit right now. At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by loud laughter. James demonstratively opened the door of the Celestial Cobalt, inviting Mrs. Baker to get behind the wheel. Of course, Victoria, you should feel it from the inside. This leather is specially tanned in Italy, and the wooden inserts are cherry wood that is at least 100 years old. Emily watched the scene with growing irritation. She was not used to such blatant disdain, but she decided not to make a scene. After all, she thought, I'm here for Matthew, not to lecture a narcissistic salesman on manners. I'll wait until they finish, she told David. Then I'd like to discuss the terms of purchase. The young consultant looked inspired, but at the same time worried. Sure, it's just... James usually doesn't like it when other consultants close big deals, especially if he's the one who initiated the communication with the client. But he practically sent me to the used car department, Emily countered. I know, and it's wrong, David agreed. I just want to warn you that there may be complications. Emily nodded decisively. I can handle the difficulties. The main thing is that Matthew gets his gift on time. As the Bakers finished inspecting the car and walked away to discuss what they had seen among themselves, Emily approached the Celestial Cobalt again. James, noticing her, rolled his eyes demonstratively. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, he began with poorly concealed irritation. Bennett, Emily Bennett, she introduced herself calmly. Mrs. Bennett, as I explained, this car is not for casual viewing. It is currently being considered by serious buyers. He nodded toward the Bakers, who were still conferring off to the side. I'm a serious buyer too, Emily answered firmly. And I'm ready to buy this car today. James had to suppress a chuckle. Look, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but let's be realistic. A Celestial Cobalt costs more than most houses in this city. This isn't an impulse buy. Our customers who buy these cars are usually... He hesitated, choosing his words. What do they usually look like? Emily finished for him, raising an eyebrow. I meant more prepared, James countered. You see, we take great care of each piece. It's not just a car, it's a work of art. That's exactly why I want to buy it, Emily replied. My brother Matthew is an artist, and this will be the best gift for his 30th birthday. James gave her a skeptical look. And you're going to pay for it? How? In 50-year installments? Emily felt her cheeks heat up with humiliation and anger. Not for myself, she reminded herself. For Matthew. I'm going to pay full price for it, she said evenly. Today. Of course, James grinned sarcastically. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to the clients who can actually afford it. He turned to the bakers who, having finished their meeting, were returning to the car. So, what have you decided? He asked with a wide smile. Mr. Baker frowned slightly. To be honest, Victoria didn't really like the color. We were thinking about something more classic. Maybe black or silver. James's face tightened slightly, but he kept his professional smile. Of course, I understand. We have other exclusive models that might suit you better. Let me show you. But Victoria Baker had already turned her attention to Emily, who was still standing next to Celestial Cobalt. Excuse me, but we seem to have interrupted your inspection, she said with genuine politeness. Are you also interested in this model? Before Emily could respond, James intervened. Oh, Mrs. Baker, don't worry. This lady is just admiring the car. I've already offered her other options. Emily felt her patience wearing thin. Actually, I'm very interested in this particular model for my brother, who has autism. It will be a gift for his birthday. Victoria Baker smiled softly. How wonderful. My niece has autism too. I know how important such special interests can be. Exactly, Emily nodded gratefully. Matthew is literally obsessed with this model. He draws it over and over again. He knows every technical characteristic by heart. And you're going to buy him a real Celestial Cobalt? Mrs. Baker looked impressed. Yes, that is my goal, Emily confirmed. Although some people think I don't look like the kind of person who can afford it. She glanced meaningfully at James. The sales manager began to look uncomfortable. The Bakers were regular customers of the salon, and their opinions carried weight. Mrs. Bennett just walked in without an appointment, he tried to explain. For such exclusive models, we usually require... Bias is such a nasty trait, don't you think? Victoria Baker interrupted with a slight smile but a steely edge to her voice. True professionals never judge a client's capabilities by their appearance. James turned pale. I'm not in any way... I'm just following protocol. At that moment, a tall, elegant man in an impeccable suit approached the group. Richard Montgomery, the owner of Imperial Motors. Is everything okay? He asked, looking around at the tense faces of those gathered. Mr. Montgomery, Victoria Baker beamed. We were just discussing the importance of being unbiased with our clients. This lovely lady, Mrs. Bennett, wants to buy Celestial Cobalt for her brother who has autism, and Mr. Higgins seems to be questioning her seriousness. Richard Montgomery looked at Emily, then at the confused James. Mr. Higgins always strives to provide the best possible service to all of our customers, he said diplomatically. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Emily said calmly. Mr. Higgins made it clear that people in jeans and t-shirts do not buy cars for $420,000, and he suggested that I look in the used car section. The salon owner's face tensed. That's completely against our salon policy. He shot a sharp glance at James. We value every client, regardless of their clothing style or other external factors. I'm glad to hear that, Emily nodded, because I'm really interested in buying. Today. The atmosphere in the salon became electric. Customers and other consultants began to take notice of the unfolding situation. James, feeling like he was losing control of the situation and risking his reputation with the salon owner, decided to go all in. Mrs. Bennett, I understand your desire to impress our esteemed customers and the owner of the showroom, he said with a forced smile. But let's be realistic. Cars like this aren't bought spontaneously by people who come to... He looked out the window at the parking lot. A 10-year-old Honda Civic. It's not serious and it wastes the time of professionals and real buyers. There was complete silence. Even the distant visitors of the salon froze, stunned by the audacity of the sales manager. Richard Montgomery's face darkened with anger. Mr. Higgins, I beg you. But Emily raised her hand to stop him. No, please. Let me answer. She turned slowly to James, and there was something deeper in her eyes than resentment, the tired disappointment of someone who had been treated like this too often. You know, Mr. Higgins, she began in a quiet but distinct voice, people like you have always existed. People who believe they can judge the contents of a person's wallet by their clothes, their accent, or the color of their skin. 10 years ago, when I started my foundation for children with developmental disabilities, people like you refused to meet with me because I was too young or not experienced enough. 5 years ago, when our foundation had already helped thousands of families, people like you still doubted my competence because I didn't wear designer clothes or arrive to meetings in a limo. She paused, taking a breath. Everyone in the salon, including the bakers and Richard Montgomery, listened with bated breath. You know what's changed over the years, Mr. Higgins? Not me. I still dress comfortably. I still drive a practical car. I still dedicate my life to helping children who need it. It's just the scale that's changed. Our foundation now has branches in 18 states and an annual budget of hundreds of millions of dollars. And you know what's funny? She smiled, but her eyes were serious. I still run into people like you on a regular basis. People who think they can determine a person's worth by their appearance. James stood there, thunderstruck, his face flushed red, but he couldn't find the words to respond. Now, Emily continued, pulling a state-of-the-art smartphone from her jeans pocket, I'm going to call my husband. He was planning on joining me later, but I thought he'd be interested in learning how Imperial Motors greets potential customers. She dialed the number and after a few seconds spoke into the receiver. Nathan? Yes, I'm in the salon. No, it's not okay. I think you should come over and... She glanced at James. Listen to Mr. Higgins explain why people in jeans and t-shirts shouldn't even dream of owning Celestial Cobalt. After finishing the call, Emily turned to the salon owner. Mr. Montgomery, my husband will be here in 20 minutes. I hope you don't mind if we wait for him before making a final decision on the purchase? Richard Montgomery looked like a man on the brink of disaster. Of course, Mrs. Bennett. Please allow me to offer you coffee or tea in our VIP area. Thank you, but I'd rather stay here with Celestial Cobalt, Emily replied. After all, that's what I came here to buy today. The next 20 minutes were perhaps the longest of James Higgins' life. He stood to the side trying to maintain his dignity, while Richard Montgomery personally entertained Emily and the bakers with conversation. David, the young consultant, who had originally wanted to help Emily, watched the proceedings with undisguised satisfaction. Exactly 19 minutes after Emily's call, the distinctive roar of a powerful engine was heard at the entrance to the salon. All heads turned to the source of the sound. It wasn't just any luxury car that pulled into the parking lot. It was a custom-modified Bugatti Chiron worth at least $3.5 million. Even in the world of luxury cars, that was an exceptional rarity. The driver's door opened, and a tall, athletic man in his 40s stepped out. He wore an impeccable Tom Ford suit, an expensive Patek Philippe watch, and the confident look of a man accustomed to power and influence. It was Nathan Bennett, a tech magnate worth billions of dollars. He entered the salon and immediately went to Emily. After kissing his wife on the cheek, he cast an attentive glance at those present. So who is Mr. Higgins here? James took a step forward, trying to look professional, but his shaking hands betrayed his nervousness. I'm James Higgins, sales manager. How can I help you, Mr. Bennett? Nathan Bennett, the man replied without extending his hand. My wife told me about your interesting approach to customer service. James swallowed. Sir, perhaps there was a slight misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Nathan raised an eyebrow. I would call that gross incompetence and discrimination. Or perhaps you believe my wife lied to me? No, of course not, James hastened to assure. It's just that, you see, we get a lot of different visitors, and sometimes it's hard to tell right away. Determine what? Nathan interrupted coldly. Solvency? Status? Right to be in your salon? Richard Montgomery approached them, trying to defuse the situation. Mr. Bennett, I am Richard Montgomery, owner of Imperial Motors. Allow me to offer you my sincere apologies for this incident. I assure you this is not our policy to treat customers this way. Nathan looked at the salon owner with mild disdain. You know, Mr. Montgomery, I now run a company with over 10,000 employees. And you know what I understand? If there is a problem in my company, the responsibility lies not only with the individual employee, but also with the system that allowed the problem to arise. The salon owner turned pale. Mr. Bennett, I agree with you completely, and I guarantee that we will take action. Actions have already been taken, Nathan replied dryly. My wife and I have decided not to do business with an organization that allows such treatment of customers. It was a devastating blow. Everyone in the room knew that losing a client like Nathan Bennett meant more than just missing out on a sale. It meant losing potentially millions of dollars in future business and the priceless prestige that came with serving such a client. What's more, Nathan continued, next month there's a Bennett Foundation Gala for children with special needs, an event that will bring together the most influential people in the city. I was planning on asking Imperial Motors to be one of the sponsors. Now I have to reconsider that decision. Richard Montgomery looked like he had just been given a death sentence. Please, Mr. Bennett, let's not rush to decisions. I'm sure we can find a way to fix the situation. Nathan looked at his wife. Emily, do you still want Celestial Cobalt for Matthew? She nodded. Yes, it's a perfect gift for him, but I don't want to buy it here. Then we'll find another one, Nathan said decisively. There are only 12 of these cars in the world, but I'm sure we can get one of them without Imperial Motors. At this point, David Chen, a young consultant, stepped forward. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Bennett, he began, clearly nervous but firm. I understand your decision and fully support your right to choose where to shop. But I would like to point out that not everyone in our shop shares Mr. Higgins's bias. Emily looked at the young man with interest. Nahorn, you are the same consultant who wanted to help me from the very beginning, right? Yes, ma'am, David nodded. And I just wanted to say that it would be an honor to help you get this car for your brother. I myself, he paused as if deciding, have a younger sister with Down syndrome, and I understand very well how important such moments of joy are. This sincere confession touched Emily. She looked at her husband, silently consulting him. Nathan looked thoughtfully at David, then turned his gaze to Richard Montgomery and the pale James Higgins. I appreciate your candor, David, he said finally, and I think I have a proposal that might satisfy everyone. Well, almost everyone. He turned to the salon owner. Mr. Montgomery, do you want to keep us as clients and potential partners? Certainly, Mr. Bennett, Richard answered quickly. Then here are my terms. First, we will acquire Celestial Cobalt today, but David will handle the transaction exclusively. Second, he cast a cold glance at James. Mr. Higgins must publicly apologize to my wife and admit his mistake. Third, Imperial Motors will make a donation to the Bennett Foundation in the amount of, say, $50,000. Richard Montgomery breathed a sigh of relief. These are more than fair terms, Mr. Bennett. We accept them with pleasure. And one more thing, Nathan added. Mr. Higgins must be there in person to present Matthew with the car. I want him to see the joy this thoughtless, impulsive gift can bring. James Higgins, realizing that he had nowhere else to go, nodded slowly. I agree, he said barely audibly. Excellent, Nathan smiled coldly. Now, David, perhaps you could tell us more about the technical specifications of Celestial Cobalt? My brother-in-law is a real expert, and I'd like to be sure I know all the details. The young consultant nodded enthusiastically, and James Higgins stepped aside, feeling his entire career being destroyed before the eyes of the entire salon. 3 days later, an unusual group of people gathered in a small private park, rented especially for the occasion. The center of attention was the Celestial Cobalt, adorned with a huge blue bow. Standing next to the car were Emily and Nathan Bennett, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the day's hero. James Higgins was sitting a little to the side, looking uncomfortable in his immaculate suit. His life had been heck for the past 3 days. Word of his failure had spread throughout the luxury car sales community. Richard Montgomery hadn't fired him yet, but he had officially demoted him and cut him off from all his major accounts. James was having to start all over again, proving his competence at the most basic sales levels. David Chen, on the other hand, was in high spirits. The commission from the sale of Celestial Cobalt had made him the most successful consultant of the month, and the personal thanks from the Bennetts had opened up new career prospects for him. Everyone froze in anticipation as a minivan equipped to transport people with special needs pulled into the parking lot. An attendant stepped out, and then, with his help, Matthew Bennett emerged. He was a thin man in his 30s with the characteristic features of a person with autism. His movements were somewhat constrained, and his gaze was initially directed at the ground. Emily walked up to her brother and gently took his hand. Matthew, I have a surprise for you, she said softly. Look what I found. Matthew slowly looked up, and the moment he saw Celestial Cobalt, his face changed. His eyes widened, his breathing quickened, and his hands began to move rapidly in the typical autistic gesture of excitement. Cobalt, Celestial Cobalt, 6-liter W12 engine, 620 horsepower, acceleration to 100 kilometers in 3.2 tenths of a second. He began to quickly list the technical specifications, as if reading an invisible catalog. Emily smiled as she looked at her brother. Yes, Matthew, and this is your car. Happy birthday! Matthew froze, not believing his ears. He blinked a few times, then turned to his sister with a look of absolute childish delight on his face. Mine? This is my car? His voice shook with emotion he rarely showed so openly. Yours, Nathan confirmed, stepping closer. Emily knew how much this model meant to you. And we wanted to give you a special gift. Matthew took a few hesitant steps toward the car, as if afraid it would disappear if he got too close. Then, with infinite caution, he reached out and touched the smooth blue surface. Deep cobalt blue, special paint with microparticles of sapphire. Changes shade depending on the lighting. He continued his technical litany, but now there was awe in his voice. Emily walked over and opened the car door. Do you want to sit inside? Matthew nodded with such enthusiasm that it was clear to everyone present that this moment was the fulfillment of his greatest dream. With the help of his escort, he settled into the driver's seat. His hands rested reverently on the steering wheel, and his eyes widened with delight. Handmade, top-quality leather, 100-year-old cherry wood inserts, 7-seat adjustment modes. He continued his monologue, touching every detail of the interior with endless tenderness. James Higgins watched the scene with a growing sense of shame and remorse. Up until that moment, the Celestial Cobalt had been just an expensive commodity, a way to earn a commission and meet sales targets. Now he saw that for this man, the car was a passion, a source of genuine joy. Emily noticed his gaze and walked up to the sales manager. Do you understand now, Mr. Higgins? She asked quietly. You never know what people mean by their dreams, and you never know who's standing in front of you if you judge only by appearances. James nodded slowly. I was wrong, Mrs. Bennett, and I'm truly sorry. You know what's sad? Emily continued, looking at her brother as he continued to examine every detail of his new car. You're not the first or last person who will try to limit my brother's or mine's opportunities because of prejudice. Matthew has been dealing with people his entire life who only see his diagnosis, but not his talents, his passions, his humanity. It's not just hurtful, it's devastating. James looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I didn't really think about it that way. Most people don't think, Emily agreed. They react to the superficial, to labels, rich or poor, healthy or sick, suitable or unsuitable. But the reality is much more complex, much deeper. At that moment, Matthew's excited cry came from the car. He had discovered some special function that he had long dreamed of seeing in real life. Nathan walked up to his wife and James. I think it's time for the official handing over of the keys, he said, looking at the sales manager. Mr. Higgins, would you like to do so? James looked stunned. I? Yes, Nathan nodded. I think it will be educational. James hesitantly took the keys with the branded keychain extended to him and slowly approached the car. Matthew, noticing his approach, looked at the stranger warily. Matthew, Emily said softly, this is Mr. Higgins. He helped us prepare your gift. It was a lie, but a small and necessary one. Matthew did not respond well to conflict and negative emotions. James took a deep breath and handed over the keys. Mr. Bennett, happy birthday to you. These are the keys to your Celestial Cobalt. Such a special car for a special person. Matthew took the keys carefully, as if they might crumble at the touch. Thank you, he said, not looking James in the eye, as people with autism often did. I'll take care of it, every day. Check the tire pressure, change the oil on time, use only special fuel. Store it in a garage with controlled temperature and humidity. James was amazed by this outpouring of technical knowledge and care. I'm sure she will be in good hands, he answered sincerely. Matthew suddenly looked into his eyes just for a second, but there was such pure and genuine joy in that look that it took James's breath away. This is the best day of my life, Matthew said, looking back at the car. The best day of my life. At that moment, James felt something inside him finally break. His cynicism, his arrogance, his habit of judging people by their appearance. In their place came a sharp, painful awareness of his own limitations and prejudices. Now, Nathan said, turning to everyone present, let's show Matthew what his car can do. We've hired a professional driver to drive Matthew around and show him all the capabilities of the Celestial Cobalt. An elegant man in a chauffeur's uniform approached them. Mr. Bennett, it is a great honor for me to be your driver. My name is Edward, and I specialize in driving exactly these models. Matthew looked both excited and a little scared. Are we going to go now? If you're ready, Edward replied softly. I know of several routes where we could safely test the capabilities of your car. Matthew looked at his sister for support. Is it safe? Will I be safe? Emily squeezed his hand gently. Absolutely, Matthew. Edward is one of the best drivers in the country, and Nathan and I will follow you in our car, so you will always be under supervision. This seemed to calm Matthew down. He nodded and moved into the passenger seat, allowing Edward to take the driver's seat. Before getting behind the wheel, Edward turned to James. Mr. Higgins, would you like to join the first trip? Mr. Bennett suggested that you come along too. James looked at Nathan in surprise, who nodded with a slight smile. Yes, with pleasure, he answered, realizing that this was not just an invitation, but an important lesson that he must learn to the end. He climbed into the back seat of the Celestial Cobalt, feeling oddly out of place in the situation. Edward started the engine, and a deep, powerful rumble filled the cabin. Matthew made a soft sound of delight, his hands moving quickly in a gesture of joyful excitement. 620 horsepower, sound tuned by acoustic engineers. The perfect balance between aggression and elegance. Edward nodded, clearly impressed by Matthew's knowledge. Quite right, sir. You are very well informed. Are you ready to experience what your Celestial Cobalt is capable of? Matthew nodded vigorously and the car moved smoothly, beginning its first journey under the control of an experienced driver. James Higgins sat in the back seat, watching Matthew, whose face lit up with a pure, unadulterated joy he hadn't seen on an adult in years. And in that moment, he realized that today had changed not only his career, but him, profoundly and perhaps irreversibly. As the car pulled out onto the open road and Edward let the engine's full power flow, Matthew's exclamation filled the cabin. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated joy, the same emotion that James had long since stopped noticing in his pursuit of status and money. Maybe, he thought, looking at Matthew's profile, illuminated with happiness. This is what I've been missing all this time. Not expensive things, not status, not power, but just the ability to see the beauty of the world and enjoy it without conditions and limitations. The car sped forward, taking with it not only its passengers, but also old prejudices, giving way to a new understanding of what truly has value in this world. And in the rearview mirror, the Bennett's car was following at a respectful distance behind them, a symbol of the protection and care Emily had always shown her brother. Protection from a world that too often judged people by their appearance, their diagnoses, their status, and lost sight of their true worth.